Hi, everyone. I see there's a couple of people still kind of joining, but thank you for joining us today. It's really great to see everyone. And thank you to Agata for organizing this online launch for her recently published book, Filmmaking in Academia. For those who don't know me and might be wondering why I'm speaking, my name's Emma, and I'm indeed the commissioning editor for filmmaking and post-production at Routledge. We are the publisher for Agata's book. We publish many different titles on our list with many different aims. Some are how-to titles aimed at those working in industry, some are classroom textbooks, but I think Agata's book is unique. In my opinion, it makes a groundbreaking addition to the evolving conversation around film as a form of academic research. It's a conversation that's growing and something that's really important to foster. This book looks at the most effective way to plan, deliver, and disseminate filmmaking based research, keeping in mind its ongoing impact. It evaluates the current state of the discipline, keeping in mind the changes it underwent since its conception 3.5 decades ago, and it aims to provide clear guidance on the practicalities essential to secure a project's success. I believe this message of support and guidance is the very heart of Agata's work. I also see this through the community she has built here. In a time where we're reshaping how we think about creativity and creative practice, titles like this are key now more than ever. I think Agata's book addresses both the practical challenges and broader implications of filmmaking research, opening new pathways and ensuring that creative work receives the recognition and methodological support it deserves in the academic landscape. I'm really pleased that the book is now published and out there, and it's really great to see the impact that it's having already. I'll pass back to Agata and Erik for this next part, but yes, thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Emma. It is such a wonderful introduction. I was blushing a little bit, so I just wanted to say, I was obviously wanted to say thank you to Emma, but really, the person I wanted to say massive thank you to is a wonderful Erik Knudsen, who is here with us, having this conversation with us over the half an hour. I'm going to embarrass you straight away, Erik, and I know you won't mind. So we had this conversation last week, and I never told this to you before, that really this chapter in this amazing book, which was published 6 years ago, so Your Method in Madness, a case study in practice research methods, is one of this kind of seminal writing. We really got me going, oh my God, no one told me that before. I was thinking about all these things, and this guy actually just wrote it in such an amazing way. And this is, I was laughing because I sent him screenshots of this book. They're all highlighted in all sorts of different colors. And this is when I realized, well, actually, this is so helpful because there's so many amazing filmmakers. They do amazing job. They do amazing research, but no one really tells you how to do it. So if that's okay with you, Erik, I'm just going to ask you to, why did you write it?
Well, Agata, I really appreciate it, and I'm so pleased that you found the book chapter useful. And I think just going back to what Emma's saying, I got my copy of your book here. Here's, and I think the fact that really what we're talking about is 30 plus years of kind of development of the idea of practice-based research within media practice. Of course, in music and other creative disciplines, there is a longer tradition, of course, for creative practice research. But what is wonderful about your book is that you actually managed to, I think, bring together that kind of sort of synthesize that 30-year experience that we've had in this field and brought it together, I think, very beautifully, very succinctly, and in a sort of systematic manner that I think is going to be very useful for particularly for new research practitioners coming into academia. And so I'm just pleased that I have, in my small way, been able to help, contribute to the excellent work that you've done with this book.
Well, you're definitely one of the people we all look at, and you're an amazing mentor and example of what fantastic job can be done with filmmaking-based research. So, if that's okay, what we're gonna do for the next half an hour is just really talk about why it's important to to make films, but also to consider the amazing potential they have as a tool to to do research, because I think there's so many amazing things. And even when we discuss, very often you and I had amazing conversation about your films and other films as well. And we speak about sound, we speak about working with actors, storytelling, building. There's so many elements to that, and research can really emerge from so many different elements. How do you see it? How does it work for you?
Well, I mean, one of the challenges, of course, when I came to UCLan in Preston, and one of my jobs was to kind of encourage and develop staff who are doing practice-based research, particularly across the creative practices. And one of the challenges, I think, the obvious challenge is an issue of confidence. Basically developing people to a point where they have confidence in what they're doing. So I'm saying, look, we've got to be able to. So as a faculty director of research, I had to go in and sit there with all the medics, all the engineers, the architects. And we as a creative community have to be able to sit in those meetings and be confident about the research that we're doing as having an equal value to all the other research that's going on in academia. So, for example, a medical researcher can very easily point to the fact that, we do medical research, we save lives. What is our comeback going to be to that? Well, my comeback would be, well, what is the point of saving a life if it has no meaning? And this is where we in the arts and humanities can play an absolutely critical role in working together with people in all sorts of other disciplines. To actually create and generate research whose ultimate end is to make all of our lives better, and to have the confidence that we can make that considerable contribution, and have confidence in the conversations we're having with our colleagues in other disciplines. And obviously to do that, I think, some of the things that you're talking about in your book is that we first of all have to be able to speak a language about our creative practice where we can highlight the research benefits and the contributions and the impacts that our research is having. So part of it is about language, part of it is about confidence. I think a significant part of it, which I know you talk about in your book, is around rigor and being able to justify, for example, if we want to attract significant sums of money for research, having to be able to justify the rigor of what we're doing, the impacts and so on. So I think, your book, I think, helps to really synthesize this in one place so that as creative practitioners, we can start to think about how we are articulating our research. How are we, so we're talking as researchers rather than just artists. So that's maybe something we can talk about a little bit. And having the confidence to elevate our research to the same level as the research that's going on around us.
It is obviously beautifully said as always, but you said the word confidence here about 10 times, which I really like, because that's really the main reason why I wrote the book. Because I had so many conversations, and I said it in a book at some point, like with amazing artists, filmmakers, and people from other disciplines, because I'm also looking at well, there's a publication on the way about kind of looking at creative practice research from other disciplines. And again, you and I talked about it on multiple occasions. Is this idea of, sometimes might be really excellent at their creative practice, but new to academia, and it happens quite a lot in our disciplines. And then they start to think about their filmmaking in slightly different categories. And this is to do with talking with within this new language and new expectations, which are slightly not the very different from any other research, but they're not exactly the same as the expectations you will have of a filmmaker, because you have to conceptualize certain things which you wouldn't necessarily think in the same way if you were just focusing on making a commercially successful or artistic beautiful or ideally both film. So I think that was the kind of a motivation for me, and the confidence very often. This confidence is very difficult to achieve when you realize that there is no template, because your film might be very different from my film and from Emma's film and somebody else's film. So how do you then find a common ground for people who are working with very different types of films and yet want to present it as research? And I think this is where I was trying to find this kind of structure. Well, actually, it doesn't matter what kind of film you're making or what kind of creative practice you engage in. There are some common things which everyone will ask you when you want to place your creative practice as a research. And obviously, you've done an amazing talk for my Rebellious Research seminar series about impact. This is one of the things which you will be measuring in a very specific way when you want to place your filmmaking in academia. But also dissemination is slightly different, because very occasionally we write about our films, and we also conceptualize them for different audiences, thinking about who your audience actually is, and considering how your viewers might get obviously something amazing from your film, but also how academic circles of filmmakers, but also not just filmmakers, people working within other fields can actually get something really important. And that thing, because obviously very often when we talk about rigor, people talk about methods and methodologies, and this idea how being creative practice, very innovative practice, and with new technologies today, it goes even further, how very often you actually have to create your own methodologies, but you still have to be able to talk about them and explain what is that you've done and how, for someone else to be able to replicate it in the future at some point. So there's lots of nice nuances over there.
I mean, what I like, Agata, is that you have a specific section where you go back to basics, about what is research, and I think that's a very useful place for people to start. I always have three questions that I always ask, whether you're a researcher or whether you're a filmmaker, for example, particularly a documentary filmmaker. Why you, and why now? And I think, there are some basic questions that we need to get comfortable about talking about. And this question of why, I think, goes back to what you and your book talk about. I think I can't remember, you quote different people's definitions of research. And I think if you sort of paraphrase, for example, UNESCO's definition of research, it is, the systematic inquiry that leads to new insights for the benefit of humankind. Yeah. So we got to be able to go back to basics and talk about our creative practice on that sort of level. What is it I'm doing that's systematic, and in what way is it systematic? What is it I'm inquiring about? How do I hope this is going to change the world around me? Who are the potential beneficiaries? And how do I hope to change them through the work that I'm creating? And these are some basic questions that if we can get back to talking about these sort of things and somehow connect that to our creative practice, then it makes it a lot easier for us to go into a room with a medic and an engineer and to talk about our research very confidently.
Absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more. And again, as you know very well, very often this question of how to manage a creative practice and academic rigor keeps coming back in those conversations. And I guess what I was trying to do is to say, well, actually, they're not very different. They're just, two sides of the same coin in that matter. You can be incredibly creative. You can do really very innovative things.
Absolutely.
And be very, very rigorous about it.
Absolutely. And the good thing about us filmmakers is that we already have creative processes in place as part of the natural part of creating work that can very easily be translated and talked about in terms of systematic inquiry. If part of the way that you develop a new story is that you sit under a tree and you meditate every morning for half an hour, and then you write some notes afterwards, and then you start doing some pictures. I mean, these are all methods.
Absolutely.
And I think what we need to become confident about is talking about these creative things that we already do, and to talk about them in the language of research. And I think that is part of the trick, I think, in terms of articulating our research and then starting to become confident about it. And I think you deal with some of these things, really nicely in your book, these questions about that creative practice and how you can translate that into the language of academia. And the problem somebody will say is, well, why do I have to talk about, why do I have to talk about my work in this way? Well, I think it's it's relatively simple in the sense that, a university is a kind of laboratory. It's a special place where we are teaching and learning and researching. And, in that sense, universities have objectives to engage with society by developing new ideas, new insights, and so on and so forth. That's our business. And somebody else is paying for it.
Absolutely.
So we need to recognize that, somebody else is paying for us to sit in a university, to generate new insights, to generate teaching and learning for our students. Our business is the development of new ideas, and we need to then feed that back into society. And that's why we have an obligation, I think, to think about it and to think about how our creative practice can work in that kind of environment. Otherwise, we might as well remain outside of academia.
Absolutely. But at the same time, I think, and I said it again many times, we have it actually quite easy in a way that people love watching movies. So, we obviously want to speak to our academic colleagues. We want to speak to our institutions, to our funding bodies. We want to make sure we talk in this kind of rigorous way. And that's all obviously very important. That's why I wrote a book. But at the same time, we talk to our audiences. We tell stories. We tell stories which are very often very universal in essence. We talk about being sad, being happy, losing people, connecting with people, and so on and so forth. And that's what why cinema and filmmaking is just such an incredibly powerful tool. And there's so many different ways you can communicate those universal stories or whatever it is that your film is really about to so many different audiences. And the best thing
Absolutely.
about it, people love watching movies. So I don't think you can just go around the room and give people very academic articles and expect that everyone will enjoy it. But it's quite likely that you show a film and people will be willing to go and see it. So we are very, very privileged in that way. And I think
absolutely.
It's an amazing opportunity for filmmakers to work within academia, because you can address so many different elements of what the film can achieve.
Yeah, and people, I don't think people should confuse this idea of creating new insights and so on with the fact that you necessarily have to write about it, or that you necessarily have to theorize about it as a theoretician might do. I mean, we are in a sense talking about perhaps applied theory, but one can generate new insights purely through practice, and one can articulate that new insight purely through the practice. Perhaps sometimes you need to support it a little bit with written kind of indicators of where the research value might lie. But, for ref, for example, you submit a bit of practice and they're only expecting 300-word supporting statement, because the new insight can be embedded in, or should be ideally embedded in the work itself, if you're trying to contribute to the field of film.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I'm gonna have to mute someone. I'm sorry, Jonathan. I'm gonna mute you here. More and again, this is this difference in terms of what is the role of practice. And again, for the purpose of what we're talking about, practice is absolutely essential. This is where the comes through. And to your point again, absolutely, like this is where this kind of new contribution is absolutely embedded within the actual filmmaking. But at the same time, I think is incredibly useful to actually conceptualize it and perhaps bring some kind of reflection on what happened during the process and what was, a bit of ethnography as well. Because again, with any creative practice, there's no way you can detach yourself from what you've done. You are the person who made that film. Hence, you're going to have the most in-depth insights in the process itself, not necessarily in reading of the film, because that could be that's completely different subject. Everyone from people who watch your films will have their own luggage to bring in terms of how they read it, but that's a completely different conversation.
Exactly. And you talk about transdisciplinary and interdisciplinary work in your book as well. And what's interesting, of course, is part of becoming confident about what we're doing is really being clear about where we're trying to make an original contribution to the field. Is it to the form itself? Is it to the process? Is it perhaps to another discipline with which film is engaging. You know, there's a lot of transdisciplinary work going on. So I would say I'll distinguish between transdisciplinary and interdisciplinary in the sense that transdisciplinary is the kind of when you're collaborating with people in other disciplines, and interdisciplinary is where you're exchanging methods.
Yes.
And you know, there's a lot of people in the sciences are desperate to work with people in the arts because in many scientific research areas, their methods are actually old and so well established that they're desperate to look for new methods. And this is one of the ways in which we in the creative arts can actually engage very productively with people in other disciplines, where we can bring some of our methods that we actually do quite naturally.
Absolutely.
And if we were to speak about them as methods, you know, people in physics or in the sciences, or particularly in the medical area, you know, where they're desperate for new ways of engaging with old problems. And so there are real opportunities for those kind of collaborative situations where we can bring our methods and our insights. But you can see there that then it's about understanding where are we making the original contribution. We hopefully are making an original contribution to, for example, ways of engaging with using film in new areas, but a medical scientist might be getting new methods or having new insights into a particular problem. And that kind of collaboration can unlock that. So when we think about, you know, creative practice research, we shouldn't just be thinking about what we can, for example, contribute to the form of cinema and our own audiences, but also how, for example, we can address some of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, you know, other health challenges that are, you know, prevalent in society around us, what way film can play a role in that. So the opportunities are incredibly rich in terms of research opportunities.
Absolutely. Actually, you made me think. I'm just examining a PhD, which is using filmmaking practice to look at archives of films made for NHS, which is very interesting. So yet a very, very different type of a PhD to the ones I normally look at, where people are just looking at a new way of filmmaking. It just really opens your horizon so much when you look at all the potential it can you know, it brings in terms of, as you say, to your point, what kind of topics and what kind of other disciplines, what kind of really impactful and meaningful way we can, just to use a grandiose expression, impact society and kind of bring something really useful about it. So I think that probably, sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say that the key thing for me about research is that we're trying to address some kind of problem, you know, to put it simplistically. And you know, it's really about trying to understand what the nature of that problem is and how film practice can be a part of addressing these problems or issues or whatever.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I think in that sense, it's worth remembering that obviously some problems need transdisciplinary engagement,
Absolutely.
but without having a discipline, you can't have transdisciplinarity. So it's you know, because I do see a lot of projects where people are talking transdisciplinarity and really there's such blobs.
Yes.
Because nobody's clearly defining what their specific contribution is to addressing a problem, and I think that can be an issue that.
No, absolutely, and I can really think about. But this is really one of the reasons why I wrote the book the way I wrote. So there's more questions than answers in a book if you think about it. But I thought that obviously it's not possible at all to just give everyone an answer about how you should use filmmaking practice as research, because every single project will be completely different. But I think by pointing the readers to the questions they can ask themselves, that obviously the answers they consider would be very applicable to the different types of filmmaking they do. And I think that probably leads me to one thing we're probably gonna use to wrap it up, because our half an hour is coming up, is
already.
two other projects that actually you weren't involved in with some way, and Emma is supporting us as well with one of them. So one of the things we're doing with a great co-editor of mine, Sharon, who I don't think is here today, we're writing a book series on creative practice research in different disciplines, and there's one volume where we're interviewing yourself and other people, and that book will look more into kind of actually providing some answers or other kind of conceptual ideas, not just questions, but it is still a focus on this idea of a toolbox, because I'm really interested, as you know very well, Erik, in terms of how we can actually support young filmmakers, researchers. What is the way to give people confidence, but also direct them to do the thing which will function as an academic piece of work or as a piece of research, if you like, but at the same time it functions like film. What kind of things you need to consider? And obviously there's a great body of knowledge out there, but what I was trying to do is to just kind of bring it all together. And another piece of work, which I was lucky enough to sign a contract with Emma 2 days ago, actually, or was it yesterday, is on fiction filmmaking as research with a really great friend of mine, Lee Jane, who might be here or might not. And you kind enough agreed to write some mini introduction for the book. So I think the reason I mentioned those projects, especially the second one, is because not very often, and obviously you are a fiction filmmaker, you've done lots of things, but this is one of the things you're making, fiction films. Not many things think about fiction filmmaking as research. I think that's really what made me think, well, it's not just about documentary filmmaking where you actually look at a problem and describe the problem through your film, and that brings some kind of new contribution to knowledge. We can think a little bit more conceptually about it. We can be a little bit more abstract. So I wonder if you'd like to just very briefly, respond to that.
Well, I think fiction has its sort of logistical problems in the sense that usually the resources required to make fiction logistically, financially, and so on are greater. So it's more complex to put together a project, perhaps. Whereas if you're making something that's more experimental and documentary in nature, it's just a little bit easier logistically to get it done. I think that is a factor. But yes, otherwise I think fiction has some very specific traditions and codes and that I think could well be researched a lot more than currently is the case. I don't know whether it's because of that difficulty that there's not more work done in fiction. There's obviously a lot of work done around theory and
yes,
fiction.
Of course.
But the practice must somehow be related to the complexity of production. I would have thought that would be my first thought about it.
I'm really looking forward to see how this project develops, and as always, it's just so wonderful to have you on board, even in a small way. So
great. It's great to be on board, and I know you're so busy, Agata. I don't know how you manage to do all these things. You're thoroughly engaged, and I think it's great how you're putting, we're also with your rebellious research seminars and so on, how you're pulling together all of these energies around practice-based research and helping to, and I'm sure, hopefully many of the people who are here today will find your efforts and your book very, very useful moving forward. So I'm really pleased to be able to help in some little way.
Thank you so very much, Erik. So I don't think we have time for any Q&As, but perhaps we can ask Emma to just very briefly tell us, since this is about the book, where people can get the book if they want it, and not from Erik's house.
Yes, no, don't be breaking into anyone's house to get it. You can get the book from routledge.com, but it's also available on third-party sellers such as Amazon and other places like that.
Wonderful. I think that's where we wrap it up for today. So once again, thank you so much. I don't really see anyone there because all I see on the screen is the person who speaks. So I was just looking at Erik all the time.
You've been looking at just me all this time. Oh my goodness.
Which is fantastic. But
well, my final part of that is congratulations, with the book. Great stuff, and and thank you to Emma for helping making it a reality. So well done.
No, thank you so much, and honestly, thank you for all the inspiration. As I said, you're partially guilty for for the fact that I wrote this book. So much appreciated. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Emma, for lovely introduction, and thank you very much for joining. I hope everyone's ready for their glass of wine Friday evening, and have a lovely weekend. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna upload it somewhere and share with whoever cannot be with
Let's
us
see if
today.
my emoji works.
No.
No, doesn't work.
Maybe it
Hi,
does.
Erik.
Hey,
Thank you.
Megat, you're here.
Yeah.
Great to see you.
Yes.
Everything well in Malaysia?
Yeah, it's good. Erik, hopefully you'll be coming back here.
Soon, I hope.
Yeah, because I told my student, she was my former student, did my PhD with me, and she is inviting you to become the adjunct professor for
That's what I
the new
hear.
university. Yeah, that's good. Hopefully I will see you again here in Malaysia.
Hopefully, Megat, you take care.
We talk a lot about this practice-based research before, and I'm glad that Agata did something very to record something in the form of printed material for us to read, right? Based on what we discussed before for a long time when I was in Preston, in Auckland before.
That's lovely. Fantastic. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much. And I'm just very cautious that the meeting will just disappear. It will just throw us out in 3 minutes. So I prefer to very politely once again say thank you, everyone, and have a lovely weekend. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
Agata.
Agata. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye.
Erik. Thank
Bye.
you,
Bye.
Agata.
Take care.
Bye. Bye. Bye.